I'm here to voice my support for all of the thoughtful and visionary, and dare I say radical, which just means grasping at the roots, recommendations that have come out of the Reimagine Policing Task Force, which include the creation of a social services department in Brookline, the removal of the SROs from our schools, moving nonviolent crisis intervention from police to a cahoots-like model, and more.
Instead of spending our scarce budgetary resources on increasing the role of policing, we should shift our priorities to supporting students and seniors, community members, businesses. We should be spending that money on social workers, supporting mental health needs, creating economic opportunities, and building a new social services department to meet these needs.
I'm speaking in support of the recommendations of the task force to reimagine policing. All of the recommendations are practical ways to improve public safety in Brookline that do not fall into the trap of mere reform of the police department itself, but actively move our town toward a more equitable and empathetic approach to public safety.
Violence isn't limited to criminal acts. It's homelessness. It's the stigma against mental illness. It's the targeted surveillance of poor persons of color. And it's the microaggressions committed against them. I support the task force to reimagine policing because they're working to build structures that address violence in its many everyday forms.
The task force on reimagining policing has modeled an open, community-driven, truth-telling process and proposed clear steps that have demonstrated success in other places. The research and surveys reveal that Brookline's residents strongly support reassigning a number of the roles currently relegated to police that could be better done by social service professionals, which would help people get the support they need before a crisis happens and prevent crises that might be worsened by the presence of someone dressed and armed like an occupying force.
And I want to speak in favor of the Reimagining Task Force proposal to remove school resource officers from school.
I'm in full support of all of the task force to reimagine policing's recommendations, but I specifically support those about removing SROs from Brookline schools and replacing the walk and talk unit.
I'm speaking tonight in full support of the task force recommendations that include removing police officers from schools, shifting nonviolent crisis and mental health related calls away from the police and to a cahoots-like service provider, as well as eliminating the walk and talk program.
I'm here to voice my full support for all of the recommendations of the committee to reimagine the police, and just really specifically everything they said, but really specifically removing police officers from Brookline schools is a really important thing to me.
The two programs that I agree with in regards to their evaluation and reallocating the funds of the school resource officer and the walk and talk program.
So as I've often said, my dad was a cop, and I am not anti-cop, but grew up with cops, and I support the Reimagining Task Force's proposal.
I endorse the Reimagining recommendations.
And I strongly support the Reimagining Task Force's recommendations.
I support the Reimagining Task Force's recommendation.
And feel that their proposals are rather modest, actually. We need much more than this, but it is a good start.
This is why I fully support the recommendations of the Task Force to Reimagine Policing.
I support all of the recommendations of the Task Force
on Reimagining Policing.
I'm here to voice my wholehearted support
of the Reimagining Task Force's recommendations.
I fully support
Task Force's recommendation.
I first would just like to express my support
of the recommendations of the
Reimagining
Police Task Force.
The Task Force to Reimagine Police.
The Reimagining Police Task Force.
And I hope the Select Board implements some of the elements from both, though honestly, I encourage you to be bold and embrace many of the ideas suggested by the Reimagining Committee. It's time.
I'm here because I value and I am grateful for the good faith and goodwill of Select Board Dr. Fernandez, despite the efforts to block the work of the task to reimagine policing by coming up with a competing reform committee at the last minute.
I would like to first start by thanking the young millennial Alice Thompson that just spoke, as well as a lot of young folks that spoke up tonight. White folks spoke about their friends' experience. And it only shows, lived experience, because I hear a lot of data, but no lived experience.
Someone give me a reason. Someone give me a good reason why we have this program in public housing and nowhere else. And why those people, what is the characteristic of those people that requires 3 officers to build relationships with them where no one else is required to do that? No one's made that, no one's told it.
We have a community of people who are low income, many of them under great stress, And this is an effort by our town to provide extra services to them so that some of that stress could be reduced.
I really, really want people to stop. I'm shaking, I'm so upset. I don't know, that's so crazy. I really need people to stop saying that this walk and talk like unit, I believe Bernard said something last night, that they're here for people who are, they're stressed out. Everybody's stressed out in the world. So because I live in housing and I get stressed out, I need an officer here to police me? No, I don't. I need people to stop thinking that low-income people and people of color need extra assistance because of that. Yes, we need support. Yes, we need resources. What we don't need is police officers.
I've been a little concerned all along about the dichotomy that is posed of, well, of course, there's the police who is the law enforcement person, and then there's the social worker who is the empathetic and caring and understands how to, deal with emotional issues and needs, as though that's the only two choices here. And the one choice that I actually think comes closest to describing the walk and talk model, and I think perhaps the SRO model as well, if it's done right, it's not the police as social worker, which maybe some might argue they're not really trained or cut out to be social workers. If you want a social worker, get a social worker. If you want a cop, get a cop. Well, what about the police officer as friend?
He talked about police officers being friends, right? Because they take people to graduation, they go to the teen center, they do all these things. We don't need police officers as our friends. We need them to do their jobs. If they feel like they want to be a part of community building, then they can walk a beat. Not walk a beat in this precinct 2. Walk the beat in every precinct in Brookline if you want a community build. Because I don't think you want a community build. What you're doing is making BIPOC people and low-income people feel more oppressed than they already are. So we don't need friends from the police. Our kids don't need friends in the police. I mean, we can have friends that are lawyers and doctors and all those wonderful careers.
For example, if you don't want the walk and talk program in the housing authority, what are you going to use as security services?
I think it's just a really paternalistic sentiment to say that these folks need this service and no one's really been able to articulate particularly why they do. Why their relationships needed to be built with low-income people more than others from the police department. What we've heard is that crime is no higher in public housing than it is outside of public housing in Brookline.
Maybe due to walk and talk?
Is it because of the walk? No, it's the same as the rest of the community. I don't know. The idea is that crime would be rampant in public housing were it not for these 3 officers?
Nobody's saying it would be rampant.
I don't think anyone's saying that. No, I understand. I don't think anyone's saying that either.
That's an exaggeration.
The walk and talk program is just sort of an offshoot of that, I think 30 years effort by this town to create a police department that reflects our values. We really can't discount what we did to create this police department. We did that. We were successful. We ought to acknowledge that success.
People keep talking about the walk and talk unit has been going on for 30 years, right? It's been, and they somehow think it's been working for 30 years. It hasn't been working for 30 years. It's been in existence for 30 years. But there's no proof that it works because it doesn't work. And I just wanted to put that on the record.
And I fear in terms of housing authority, that it's just whoever happens to be around in the sector, or even worse, private security. And police aren't going away, so from public housing or anywhere else. So,
if something goes down in my apartment, I'm stuck with whoever is in the sector.
Okay.
I've always felt that having the police be involved in the community in ways other than traditional, I'll call it, policing was very, very important for not only the police, but also for our citizens and for our kids. It's great that people in this community can be friendly with the police, and I understand that there are some tensions with police officers by some, And we need to work on that, but that doesn't mean we should throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Here's what concerns me. Let's say that they come to the conclusion that indeed there's a degree to which this is unwelcome that requires that they terminate the program as it is, in terms of the relationship of the police department to the housing authority. What then replaces it? Because I think the question that this begs is, don't we need some kind of regular contact between the Brookline police and whether it be members of the citizens, excuse me, I'm getting all tangled up in my words, residents of the Brookline Housing Authority housing, residents of Precinct 15, residents of kids at the high school.
And specifically to you, John, don't expect that the people of color like mine would have a conversation with you about people of color to validate where we stand about policing, because you have no lived experience, you have no clue what it is to be Black, and you definitely don't know Black people out here, because if you did, we would know you.
But what I heard last night was, I think those people need, It was clear that the information that we spent 6 months gathering, the words that Kim said, the words that the essential core of what we wrote did not make it in. It didn't penetrate. It didn't matter. And then it also didn't matter that 37 people came in, guns blazing, psyched about what we had and our ideas, not to mention the public hearings previous to that, that I know select board members sat in on. It didn't make it in, and that's enormously, enormously problematic, because why are you there, select board members? Why are you there if it is not to hear what people are saying? It's not to hear the people you want to hear. It's to hear what people affected by these issues are saying to you.
The schools found a way to do this for over 100 years, and without police in the schools.
I'm telling you that I think that there was a role for the police. We kept kids out of that prison pipeline. And the police have developed some skills in that area, and I would hate to lose that. I really would. I think it was an important effort. And police can talk about prisons in a way that I think, and talk about it with kids in a way that I think that other people may not be able to, because they haven't experienced it as much. So, we've had police in and around the school anyway for quite some time. I know that there sometimes were police officers there at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day. Sometimes kids were frustrated and would start to fight with each other. And, this was a help to have a police officer there so that it didn't get out of hand, and that teachers were not required to intervene, because sometimes that had happened in the past and a teacher got injured. So we don't want that. And don't know when tempers will flare.
I'm not sure that at least some folks on the select board have read our reports. That is not clear to me. The SRO in Brookline High School is not there for security. It's not there for security for school shootings or for anything else, as we address in our report and in our public meetings many times. What about the couple dozen doors that are left open all the time? This is not the situation that we're dealing with.
As a history teacher, I have to build my argument with evidence. As a police officer, you build a case with evidence. And I don't see it other than skewed evidence. My basic point of contention is, what made her get there in the first place? And how is that improved? And again, I can't actually find that in the Reform Committee's report, anything from Brookline Police's website. I can't find any of that. And so, again, it is at minimum deceptive.
For people who think we don't have a citizen review board of the police, we actually do. You can argue whether it's effective or not, but that is currently assigned to the select board in their role as police commissioners.
the DICR group would have investigatory powers, which is no big deal, but not unless I'm misremembering this, not subpoena power. So they couldn't subpoena an officer and compel him to come before them to answer questions. We can do that.
Really? That's the first time hearing about it.
Well, yeah, that's one of the great powers we have as a select board.
Why don't we use that more?
For what?
Who do you want to
Who
subpoena?
do you want to subpoena?
I mean, 4 years I've been on this board, I've never issued a subpoena.
Maybe these are not issues that this board should be work with. And the two committees gave our recommendations, the data that we've collected, and it's really up to the school committee and the commissioners of the housing authority to make this decision.
I think we do have to leave it up to the schools, and we have to leave it up to the housing authority as to what is best.
There's sort of a consensus that this is going to be decided by the housing authority and the school committee, and that's the way it should be.
Yeah, I want to be really careful about pushing the school resource officer to school committee. There's a reality that the select board are the commissioners of the police. And so while I do think, and we've put this in the report, that the school committee should be much more connected to the process. And I've said this here before, I don't think the select board has the right to absolve itself now. You can't claim both. You can't be commissioners and not knowledgeable and then say this is a school issue. You don't get that privilege.
It's also funded on the town side of the budget too.
Right. 75% of MECO scholars and Steps to Sex students or parents didn't even know we had a school resource officer. They didn't even know.
It's unfair to say, at a select board meeting that people from housing didn't show up to talk about, the walk and talk program or anything like that, because they don't know. They don't know. I didn't know. And if they do know, they don't want to talk about it because, people are afraid. And I don't think people understand this fear because maybe they've never been homeless. Maybe they've never been in a place where the smallest things could really get you evicted. And I think people think I don't know. I think we're making these things up.
We've been pretty clear. We can't find any evaluations of the walk and talk program for 30 years. I would like to know what the grant was, because I know through history at that time, there was all kinds of grants to get police to go into low income communities during the war on drugs. So I would like to know what the grant was to do it. That then turned to the BHA's responsibility. We haven't even been provided that. I think our whole point has been there is no community involvement. The police determine what community involvement is and then say this is good community involvement.
Town meeting member Scott Gladstone, he knows that I think he had a great idea, and I called him the next day to say so. We had a nice conversation about it. Who floated the notion of a conference committee. He compared this to, okay, so now we've got these two reports. They don't always agree on everything. We could go in one direction with one report, other direction with the other report.
I agree with John that Scott made a very good argument for a conference committee and a compromise. And
I am all for compromise. I really believe in a democratic society. It's got to happen. And I also am a big believer that at the end of the day, we're all still going to be living here together. So we might as well find a way to live together to the extent that we can. I don't think you do that by ignoring overwhelming support is step one. I think last night's meeting was like, okay, let's launch directly into compromise about everything.
My concerns is, as someone noted, very early on, this notion of the conference committee and this idea. I think the only comments that were referenced from my colleagues were those that were saying we should be, I think there were maybe 3 comments that in particular that were saying, for these bodies to get together and hash it out. I think what that misses is that there are some. In some cases, these proposals are diametrically opposed, right? Work to improve and add walk and talk officers, literally add another officer versus eliminate the program. So far, the feedback that we've gotten at public meetings and over email has been overwhelmingly in support of the task force report. And so when we talk about sitting at a bargaining table and the need for the task force to be giving and giving and giving and getting nothing in return, the weight of the community right now, as far as the feedback that we've gotten, is in favor of our report. I think board members need to take our work more seriously, though. Frankly, you don't get credit for starting a task force. You get credit for listening to the task force, and that hasn't happened yet. I haven't heard, except maybe a nod from Heather Hamilton, a word from any of the board members that says, you know what, there's something really good here, and we need to work on that. I literally have, and I've been in the meetings. I literally haven't heard it yet. I've gotten no indication that board members are ready to support anything that we've proposed.
I'm really trying to understand why people sign up or run for office and why people are on the select board, right? So if you're on the select board and you want to make change, you need to be more open-minded. I don't see any open-minded people. Well, I take that back. I'm going to take that back. Raul's pretty open-minded. And then there was a few people that was, yes, last night that was like, oh, wait, we might have them. Okay, maybe not. It's about politics. It's about making change. It's not about control or being known or being popular. It's about making real change that is meaningful for people so that everyone can feel like they're living, not the equitable living. Like that's what it should be like.
I worry that other select board members can just easily disregard what has been put right in their face.
What it looks like the select board is doing, to me, and I think to a lot of people, is the same thing that we have brought up a couple of times in these meetings, that we've been concerned. Hey, were we really just put here as like, let's create a committee to shut up the people of this town? There was a lot of passion at the spring town meeting of last year. And it was said, let's put it to the select board. The select board was ready to not have this task force happen at all. It was weeks of fighting and people speaking up from the town in order to make this happen. So when we put together this report, and the only things that you have to say about it are a critique here and there, and no comment about what pieces of it you will accept, I think you guys are looking really clearly like you put together a committee to shut up the town.
As leaders, when you speak and voice stuff out of your mouth, I hope that you do make sure that you have the facts straight, at least. Yours that much. And it's kind of disappointing, especially you, Bernard, as a Black man, you're supposed to inspire us younger generation. The Black chair of the Brookline Select Board, good narrative headline. I'll leave that alone because saying short of inspiring are kind words. But when you pull out my address out there, you leave across the street directly. I'm outside with the community. We don't know you out yet, between the people of color. So that says a lot to who you are, but you keep doing what you do and keep improving your character with the things you do. A lot of us are looking forward to May 4th election.